Hi, this is David with Shur-Loc Fabrics, and today we will be taking a look at the T-200 Easy Frame Stretcher. So a couple components that you'll see in your kit here are the stretcher handle itself and the stretcher body. It also has the removable and replaceable stretcher strips on here. And these just simply slide right out of the end of the slot. Every single one of these comes with a backup stretcher strip as well. So those are fully replaceable, but I'll show you a couple techniques in the video of how to make these last as long as possible. Should last for years without having to replace them. Also in that kit that you can't see here is a couple screws with spacers on there, standoffs, and a couple large washers. So you'll just mount those into the end of your table, and that will give you the ability to hang up your stretcher handle there, and so your hand's free to be able to stretch the rest of the way. Now we've got our safety bar here that just bridges over the top of the frame. That's really your third hand. It just prevents the frame from tilting up when you're stretching. And to set that, I'll show you in a second to be able to set the correct elevation on that. It's really easy to adjust. Now, one of the angles, you'll get a set of two different style of angles here in your kit as well. One of them is plastic all the way on both sides. So we've got the thicker black base here. That's going to go underneath our frame. This is really for elevating the frame while stretching. So this one will be used for stretching and for removal. Actually, this will always be an elevator for the frame itself. And then this has a white vertical plastic piece on here as well. That's really just for anti-friction for the stretcher handle. So when we set the height of our safety bar here, we will simply just raise it up and put that underneath. Now, the ideal position to do that is to rotate here and do a short end. So when we put this elevation underneath, what you want to do is you want to create this wedge. So as it slides under there, you should feel the frame start to touch the safety bar. And that's with the elevation underneath there. If yours doesn't do that, just simply make the adjustments with the wing nuts on the bottom and these lower nuts here, so that will raise and lower to the proper height. So once you've got that all set, then you'll be ready to stretch. So let's set this aside until we get it all loaded up. And the last piece that we have here is another angle, but it has a rubber backing on it. You can see it's flexible. So it's got the thicker base portion and then a rubber backing. That rubber backing is going to go against your frame, and this will be used for removal only. So we'll set those aside until later. We'll use those in just a bit. But let's load up our Easy Frame here. We've got a 2331. This is a 125 profile frame, and it has the endurance style tension bars on there. So we'll be stretching up an endurance panel. I've got one right here. This one happens to be a 180 S mesh, so it's a 48 micron. It's a thin thread S mesh. This is a Murakami branded mesh, and we've got all of our information that's listed on the side there. That's really helpful for you. The other critical thing that you want to start off with is being able to read all of that information, as opposed to being upside down and having it be backwards. You want to have, just like you would normally read it. In fact, you can just face it towards you if that's the easiest way. So always make sure that you can read that. And that way the lap on the fold over on the edges is going to be going the right way. And that's really important for some steps down the road here. So I'm just going to load that all underneath my safety bar and get that into position. We'll take one of our 3/16 nylon rods here that are included with your endurance style Easy Frame, and just want to slide that into the end of the pocket on the perimeter of the endurance panel. I'll take one of my long tension bars here, and I'll just simply insert the mesh first and then the rod. I'll center the mesh, center the rod, then place this on hook number 2. There's 3 total hooks, and I'm just going to insert that on the middle hook, hook number 2. There's also score marks on the end of the frame there, so that gives you your bearing for keeping the tension bar centered on the frame itself. So whatever we do to to one side, we want to match that on the parallel side. And we will always start on the long side loading. So long, long, and then short, short is the way we're going to go. Very, very important process, sequence in the process rather. So again, I'm just going to go down, leave a couple inches on the end there so it's really easy to slide it into the inner slot of your tension bar. You can see how that mesh will just go right in there very easily. I like to keep the tension bar up more vertical. That way there's virtually no resistance on the mesh at all as it slides into the tension bar. So center the mesh, center the tension, or the rod rather, and then center the tension bar with your little notches on the frame. The notches on the frame will only be on the long side. Once we take care of the long sides, the short ends will basically take care of themselves. They'll self-center. So I've got both long sides done, so that's exactly what I wanted to do first. I'm gonna go to one of my short ends, doesn't matter which one you go to. I would normally do this process on that side of the table first before I slid it underneath the safety bar here. But for the sake of the video, I want to be able to show it to you and not block what you're being able to see there. So I'm just centering the mesh, centering my 3/16 nylon rod, loading this on hook number 2, just like I have everywhere else. Grab my last side here, slide in my rod, slide in my tension bar there, center, center, and hook number 2. All loaded up, everything should be on hook number 2 now, nothing on hook 3. Even if you could pull it to hook 3 by hand, don't do it because we want to stretch in the right sequence. So we're going to pull long to long, short to short always. This is where we will use our plastic elevation angle now. So just take the thicker black part here, we'll slide that underneath the frame, and the white vertical will go against the frame in the back. That's going to be a bearing surface for our aluminum on our round portion of our stretcher tube here. So next step, just load in your stretcher strip. Just pause for a second there real quick. Make sure that that stretcher strip is fully seated. Just like I mentioned in the beginning, give you a couple tips on how to make these last longer. This is what you do, because it's really easy for this strip to be up just a little bit. And if you run your hand on it, you can instantly feel that with your fingertips, that that's not down all the way. So you want to make sure that that's fully seated, and then you can proceed to start stretching down. So our safety bar is holding it all down in place, and we just hear the visual, or the audible rather, clicking of the hooks engaging there. But I also want to get the visual too. So I want to look on both ends, make sure that those hooks are all engaged. All 3 of them are going to mesh together just like that. So it's very important before you remove this to make sure that all of those hooks are engaged. So I'll slide that back. This I just keep right here handy because I'm going to be using it for the next step. I'm going to rotate around underneath my safety bar there, slide in my elevation piece underneath the frame. I'm going to then just load in my stretcher strip, make sure that that's fully seated down in there. And remember, I'm going from long side to long side, so I'm working my parallel sides, and I'm going to hook 3 on both of those. Hook 3, hook 3. I heard a double click there, so just do a quick visual, make sure that that's fully seated down, looks good before I remove my stretcher. I'm going to slide that out, rotate around. Doesn't matter which short end you do first, just pick a short end, push that underneath so it wedges in there and holds it nice and secure for us. You can also wax the surface of your tabletop there as well for easy turning, if that's an option for you. Got my stretcher loaded in, make sure we're fully seated down there. You can start to push pressure down, whichever ways. I like to push with my forearm. I also like to put one hand on here once I start getting some pressure and tension on there. So I like to feel these, feel everything get engaged with the tension bars. Now I'm gonna pause here real quick because what I wanna show you is there's 2 different styles here that we make the panels, and the S thread, or the thin thread, or even a high mesh like a 280, 300 mesh, higher mesh counts like that, will have the glue stop short in the corners here. So I'm going to back off. I'm going to show you an example of two different styles here. So as you can see on this panel here, we've got glue that goes in the full perimeter. It goes all the way around the corner there, and it does that on all four corners. So this mesh here is a 160/64. It's a middle of the road, high, really popular mesh count that a lot of people use, but it's a stronger thread. So that gives us the ability to be able to lock up the corners and just have full perimeter glue protection around there. With the S mesh, or the thinner thread or high mesh counts, we have to leave this a little bit shy because we need the proper amount of softening in the corner because the mesh is a lot more delicate. So this is where you come into play here, and you have to do a little bit of manual softening. So we will just push down on this. I like to go about halfway in between the two hooks. So this is only applicable on the short ends and from hook 2 to hook 3. So we're going from hook 2 to almost hook 3 now. I'm going to stop a little bit shy, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push down on both of these black rods here. There's a little literal wiggle room in there to be able to move that around, and you'll see some of that mesh release there. It's not necessary to do a lot, just a little bit will take care of it. But as your frames get worn in, there can become, ink, emulsion, all kinds of stuff that dries in there, and that can impede that from doing the mesh from slipping like it should into the corners and getting the right amount of softening. So it may be up to you to kind of pause just like we did there, do a little shake on there, make sure that you've got a little bit of soft in the corners, and that will prevent any little nicks or tears or little tiny rips that could occur in this really fine, delicate mesh. I've got that loaded onto hook 3. I heard the audible click on there, but like I said, it's always good to do that double check on there to make sure that it is fully engaged before you remove the stretcher. We'll repeat that process one more time here just to show you how that is done. So I'm just going to pull it part of the way again. If you feel like you've already got excess mesh there in the corner, no need to wiggle on the ends there, but sometimes one side or the other will get hung up, especially as your frames start to get used. This one's cooperating really nicely because it's a brand new setup. It's the ideal setup when everything's nice and polished and new. So that's all good to go, but it's important to just do a little quick wiggle there, and then you can proceed with the rest of the stretch. Lock that on, do your quick visual on each end, make sure that those hooks are fully engaged, and we're set. We've got this one all done. Put on my Shur-Loc 130 tension meter here. This one's I've stretched this one twice now. It's at 33 newtons. That's pretty common for this 180S. I think 36 is max. We like to stay just a little bit below, and it will relax down from there just a bit more. The next step that I want to show you though is for the removal. So some guys will, if there's a single color job that you're running, you want to leave the emulsion on, you think the customer's coming back, but you don't want to tie up the frame, you can actually remove the fabric with the emulsion, single color only, again, obviously no registration. So you could store that, you can put it back on. If you have a really coarse mesh that you want to remove for a little while that you don't use very often for glitter or something like that, you can also remove your fabric, put it back on. But also for increasing tension on the endurance panels, you can actually add an additional black 3/16 rod to increase tension over time if it starts to reduce down with relaxation and usage and the stretch of the natural stretch of the mesh. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So we've got a fully stretched screen here. I'm going to put in my normal elevation angle, the plastic angle, just like we've been using all along for stretching. Then this is where the rubber backed angle is going to come into play. So I will put the elevation portion outward this time, and I'll put the rubber backing against the frame. So we'll just slide that in there. That rubber backing is going to be like a grip, so it doesn't climb up and it doesn't slip on there too easily. So I'll take my stretcher here, my stretcher in. Again, take that extra 2 seconds to make sure that that's fully seated down so you don't end up bending one of those pieces in there on your stretcher strip. And then this is where I'm going to put a little down pressure on there. Make sure that it's right engaged underneath your safety bar there. But this is also really important to put a firm hand down because you've got all the tension of this mesh that's going to want to be released at one time. So if you do it really aggressively, it could slide over the top and you could possibly rip one of the ends. So if you're trying to save this, it's really important to do this slow and in control. So I'll put a firm hand down. I'm thinking like, 5, 10, maybe 15 pounds of force down on here as I disengage. So I'll push down on my handle here, and as I do, that just lifts off on those hooks, and I'll just roll up nice and slow and in control there. Then I can roll my stretcher all the way forward, disengage the stretcher strip from the tension bar. I'll have my stretcher, or my tension bar rather, just hanging down below there. So this is where I can just simply remove. This is where I could have added in an additional rod for increasing tension and then re-stretch. Whatever you need to do at this point, you've got that. So that's exactly what this little guy here is for, the angle with the rubber backing. So to remove, you would just simply rotate around, do the other short end, and then the long side. It's the exact reverse action that we did on the stretching process. For removal, you do the short ends first, and then you're all set. So we've stretched up the endurance panel here. You've seen how to use the easy T-200 stretcher tool. And for more information, please visit Shur-Loc.com. Thanks so much for watching.